The seventh day.
Seventh day Sunday edition of our 30-day journey through Mark. Some people have been asking, Ben, are we covering every single verse in Mark? And the answer is, in our conversations, Ben and I, we're not covering every verse. We didn't want to just go so surface that we couldn't say anything. We want to really zero in on some different texts so we could do some real cool work like we're going to do today, define some terms and try to bring some understanding. However, as a community, we're going to read the whole book of Mark together during this time. So today we're looking at Mark chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. And so that means we skipped over some chapters or some verses in chapter 2. And so what Ben and I are doing, what I invite you guys to do is, after this time together, go ahead and read those sections. So by the end of it, we've all together read the whole book and being able to zero in and dig a little deeper on certain parts. Yeah.
So today, Mark 3, 1 to 6, and to catch up from Mark 2, 18, and then just read right to 3, verse 6. So maybe I'll set the stage. I'll read a little bit of the story here.
Perfect.
Okay. So it says, another time Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. And so it might just be good to pause there and define, because that's kind of the theme of this passage. Sabbath.
Yeah, so I don't know about you, Ben, but like for my grandparents, Sabbath was a thing that they took seriously as Christians. It was like this day a week where, things weren't open on Sundays. You wouldn't do sports on Sundays. You definitely wouldn't work on Sundays. And that really comes from a Judeo-Christian tradition that goes way back and is still very intensely practiced by Jewish people today. And, do you remember when we were in Israel filming in the Jewish quarter?
Yes.
And we didn't realize we were still filming, and it came to sundown on Friday as Sabbath was about to start. And literally within like a few minutes, everyone's scrambling to buy food and good stuff to have with their family over that 24-hour period. Then all of a sudden, just everything shut down. No one was anywhere. Yeah. And the elevator in our hotel room.
Exactly. I was going to say the hotel. I remember the elevator. I'm like, why isn't this working? I'm pushing the button. It wasn't working because they're like, oh, because it's Shabbat, it's Sabbath. And so the elevator, you can't push the button, and you don't need to push the button. It just stops at every floor. It goes down all the way down, and then it stops at every floor on the way up. It's wild.
It's so interesting. And so all of this starts actually at the beginning of how God created the world. So in the Genesis account, which is the narrative account written for the people of Israel to understand who they are and who God is and what it means to be human, describes God creating the world in 7 days, or in a 7-day rhythm. And so for the first 6 days, he's creating. On the 6th day, he makes man and women. He says, oh man, that is so good. And then Genesis chapter 2 says, on the 7th day, he rested. Now, God didn't rest because he was tired. He rested to delight. And then when his followers, the people of Israel, became a nation and began to mature and grow, he gave them commands. Like right beside do not murder and do not steal was keep the Sabbath. Like don't mess with this. 1 day a week for a 24-hour period. You are going to remember that I'm your God, that you're loved, that you're my special people, and that you should not work so that you can delight and rest. It's a real beautiful thing. It was about liberation and about who they are as a people in light of God and his love for them.
And so then when you come into this story with Jesus, though, it's what's happened is it seems like they've lost that liberation, delight, the love of just resting in God's good creation. And it's actually turned into something even for judgment, for control, for,
what these religious leaders are doing is they are trying to turn it into something that was meant as a gift, but now has become a tool by which they can compare themselves to others and judge others. And this is something we all have to be mindful of, is that we can take the instructions of God and miss the heart of the instructions of God. Like the instructions of God are for the good of people and about love and generosity and compassion. A lot of what Jesus is doing, you'll see it not just even here. He's actually coming into a scene that is taking all the laws seriously, but not with the spirit of love and compassion, but as a way to control people and manipulate people. And so what we see actually happen, verse 4, he asks this question, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to harm, to save a life or to kill? So he's poking at this idea, like, do you get at the heart of this? But they were silent, it says. And it says he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and then said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched out and his hand was restored. And so all of a sudden we see Jesus enraged with anger. Why? Because people are taking something meant for good and using it for power and control and manipulation.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we see the Jesus's compassion again on display, saying, "Hey, I so care about this man," and so he says he calls them out. He says, "Hey, stand up in front of everyone," and then that phrase where it says that he looked at them and he was angry and he was grieved or distressed at their stubborn hearts because
Mm.
they're refusing to see that, like you were kind of saying, the instructions versus the heart of it, and they're refusing to see the heart of it. It is just like, no, the heart of God for this man is to be free, no matter what day of the week it is.
Mm-hmm. And there's a bigger story going on here about how Jesus is trying to help even the people of Israel begin to see that their purpose on this earth isn't to like build walls up between them and others, but to actually use their set apartness as a blessing to the rest of the world. But that's not how they're seeing it. And they're so threatened by what Jesus is doing that in the last verse, in verse 9, it says, the Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. So what we see here is the religious power people of religious power and of political power begin to meet together to scheme. And ultimately how it's going to culminate in the book is those two groups will work together to see Jesus crucified and killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, sticking on this theme of Sabbath, which got them so upset that they would even go to these lengths of starting to work to see him killed. Let's answer some questions around Sabbath for us today.
Sure, that'd be great. Like, do you keep a Sabbath, Ben, or like in some way?
I do, yeah. And it's something that I haven't always done, but I'm like more and more I'm realizing, oh, this is a gift, the weekly rhythm, it makes sense. And the idea of like setting time aside to not work, paid or unpaid, not work, rest, and it's like, yeah, go deep with family and friends and the Lord himself.
Yeah. Yeah. Rach and I try to keep a Sabbath. You know, we don't always feel like we're pro at it, but when at our best, it's a 24-hour window every week, usually Friday night over to Saturday, because we often work on Sundays. I know for a lot of people it's Sundays, but as a pastor, Sundays are kind of work day. And so that way we can have like fun night together on Friday, eat some good food, and wake up on Saturday without anything on my mind that I have to do. I didn't wake up to get more work done. I got to wake up with like, oh, I went to bed restful. I get to wake up restful, eat good food, spend time with God, go for a walk, like really do things that build me up. And it's really to push against this pattern of like work, 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 and then crash, but
Right.
to have a healthy relationship with work and a healthy relationship with rest. And I struggle with that. And so Sabbath is like something I fight with, but then I also find is a major gift. But Sabbath for the Christian today, I don't think is the exact same as it was for the people of Israel, you know, before Jesus or even in the story that we're reading. Because it was a command. Like it was very, very
clearly
clear.
a command, yeah.
It's clearly a command. So if you're reading the Old Testament, you might ask yourself, is it a command for me as a Christian today? And this might sound interesting, but I think that we have to see the Sabbath as Christians in two ways. First, as something that was ordained for the people of Israel, as a foreshadow of a bigger liberation that was to come. And that Jesus actually is the bigger, better Sabbath who invites all of our souls into Sabbath rest. And so in one sense, Jesus actually fulfilled the Sabbath. So it's this incredibly important part of the story of God. And then Jesus comes into human history and actually is about bringing this whole Sabbath rest into its biggest flourishing. So that's one level. But then as a second level, I think we understand it as a healthy spiritual Christian discipline that perhaps made into the baked into our bones as human beings. There's a 7-day rhythm where we need to work and we need to rest. And I have found that for me, a Sabbath is an essential part of a healthy journey with Jesus. Right, with prayer, Bible reading, fasting, meditation, community celebration is Sabbath.
Yeah, I think I've found the same. And so then in that sense, we like you said, it's like commanded in the Old Testament, but New Testament is not so much a command as the way you were saying. It's like it's
invitation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
If you were to recommend like a best place to start for Sabbath, where would you point people?
We love John Mark Comer's book, right? I know in our community and our friends, a lot of people have been really blessed by it. What is it? Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Ruthless John Mark Comer's book, and he does a lot of messages and podcasts on it, and we found it really helpful for understanding.
Can I end with this one thought? Whether you're practicing a Sabbath or not yet, I want you to know that even when you're not producing output, when you're not at your best, you're not working, making money, winning, God's love is for you. One of the beautiful things about the message of Jesus and the message of all of the scripture is that God delighted in you before you did a thing. And on the seventh day, he rested because he gets a kick out of what he made. And if you could see that posture on God's faith, I think it would change the way that we approach him.
Yeah, love it. All right. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, guys.